I'm Rebecca, 26 years old, and I'm standing in my childhood bedroom holding an empty savings account statement while my world crumbles around me. My parents just told me they gave my $45,000 wedding fund to my sister Stephanie for her dream wedding because, in their exact words, Stephanie deserves a perfect wedding, she's always been our special one. My fiancé Jonathan witnessed this betrayal firsthand, watching me realize that my decade of sacrifice meant absolutely nothing to them. While I worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, and lived like a monk to save every penny, they were planning to hand it all over to their golden child. Jonathan's jaw clenched as he watched my devastation, and then he spoke words that changed everything. They have 72 hours. I didn't understand what he meant yet, but my life was about to transform completely. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and don't forget to hit that like button if you're ready for a story that will absolutely blow your mind. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because what happens next will leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't want to miss how my quiet, unassuming fiancé completely destroyed my manipulative family in just 3 days. Let's get started with the most shocking family drama you've ever heard. Walking up the familiar driveway to my parents' house that Tuesday afternoon, I felt excited about finalizing my wedding plans. Jonathan and I had been engaged for 8 months, and I couldn't wait to review the budget and confirm our vendors with my parents. I'd been saving for this moment since I was 16 years old, working every weekend at the local diner, picking up catering shifts, and living with 3 roommates in a tiny apartment just to put away money for my dream wedding. My savings account had grown to exactly $45,312 over 10 years of sacrifice. The moment I walked through the front door, something felt wrong. My mother Patricia was fidgeting with her pearl necklace, a nervous habit I'd learned to recognize over the years. My father Richard couldn't make eye contact, instead focusing intensely on some imaginary spot on the carpet. Jonathan squeezed my hand gently, sensing the tension that filled the living room like thick smoke. "Honey, we need to talk," my mother began, her voice shaky and uncertain. "There's been a change of plans regarding your wedding fund." The word change hit me like a physical blow. I felt my stomach drop as she continued, "We've redirected those funds to help Stephanie with her wedding preparations. She announced her engagement to Brad Morrison III just 3 weeks ago, and well, you know how important this union is for our family." The room started spinning. "Redirected?" I whispered, barely able to form the words. "What do you mean, redirected?" My father finally looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and defensive anger. "Rebecca, you have to understand. Stephanie is marrying into the Morrison family. They're practically royalty in this town. This wedding needs to be absolutely perfect, and frankly, your plans seemed a bit modest for our family's reputation." I stared at them in complete disbelief. This was the same family that had given Stephanie a brand new BMW for her 16th birthday while I got a lecture about the value of hard work. The same parents who paid for Stephanie's 4 years at an expensive private college while I worked my way through state school with scholarships and student loans. The same people who helped Stephanie with the down payment on her downtown apartment while I shared a cramped space with strangers just to save money. "But that's my money," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I worked for 10 years to save that. I missed countless parties, vacations, shopping trips. I ate ramen noodles for dinner more times than I can count. That money represents every sacrifice I've made since I was a teenager." My mother's expression remained unmoved. "Darling, Stephanie's wedding is an investment in our family's future. The Morrison connection will benefit all of us. You'll understand when you're older and see the bigger picture." The casual dismissal of my decade of sacrifice felt like a slap across the face. Jonathan's grip on my hand tightened, and I could feel the tension radiating from his body like heat from a furnace. Besides, my father added with infuriating casualness, "Your wedding can be simple and elegant. There's something to be said for understated celebrations. Maybe a small ceremony in the church basement, a potluck reception. Very charming and authentic." I felt tears burning behind my eyes as the reality of their betrayal sank in. They hadn't just taken my money, they had stolen my dreams and handed them to my sister like a birthday present. Every late-night shift at the diner, every weekend spent working catering events instead of hanging out with friends, every time I'd chosen saving over spending had been completely meaningless to them. "You don't understand," I said, my voice breaking with emotion. "This wasn't just about money. This was about proving to myself that I could achieve something on my own. This was about having one day in my life where I felt truly special and celebrated." My mother sighed impatiently, as if my emotional response was an inconvenience. "Rebecca, you're being dramatic. Stephanie has always been our shining star. She deserves to have everything perfect for her special day." The words, "she deserves it," echoed in my head like a cruel mantra. What about what I deserved? What about the years I'd spent being the responsible daughter, the one who never asked for help, who always put family obligations before my own wants and needs? I looked at Jonathan, whose face had gone completely white with contained rage. His normally calm brown eyes were blazing with an intensity I'd never seen before. "How long have you been planning this?" Jonathan asked quietly, his voice dangerously controlled. My parents exchanged a quick glance before my father answered, "Well, we've been moving some funds around for the past few months. We wanted to make sure everything was in place for when Stephanie needed it." The casual admission that they'd been planning this betrayal for months while smiling to my face and discussing my wedding plans felt like another knife twist in an already gaping wound. I thought about all the conversations we'd had over the past year about flowers and venues and guest lists. They'd sat there listening to my excited chatter about my dreams while secretly plotting to hand everything over to Stephanie. The level of deception was staggering, even for them. "You've been lying to me for months," I said, my voice hollow with shock. "Every time we talked about the wedding, you knew you were never going to let me have that money." My mother's expression turned cold and defensive. "We weren't lying, Rebecca. We were making practical decisions for the good of the family. Stephanie's marriage to Brad will elevate our entire social standing. Your marriage too." She glanced dismissively at Jonathan. "Well, it's nice, dear, but it doesn't really benefit anyone but you too." The insult to Jonathan seemed to flip a switch inside him. I watched his jaw clench and his hands curl into fists at his sides. "Mrs. Harrison," Jonathan said, his voice so low it was almost a whisper, "you have no idea what you've just done to your daughter. Or what you're about to face because of it." There was something in his tone that made my father straighten up and pay attention for the first time all evening. "Are you threatening us, son?" Richard asked with false bravado, puffing out his chest like a rooster. Jonathan smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm not threatening anyone, sir. I'm simply observing that actions have consequences. And the consequences for what you've done to Rebecca are going to be quite severe." The quiet confidence in his voice sent a chill down my spine, and I realized that my mild-mannered fiancé might have depths I hadn't fully explored yet. As we left my parents' house that night, my legs felt like jelly and my mind was reeling from the betrayal. Everything I'd believed about my family, about my place in their lives, had been shattered in the span of one conversation. Jonathan helped me into his car and drove us home in silence, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. I had no idea that this was just the beginning of the most shocking week of my life. The next morning, I was still in a state of shock when my phone rang with Stephanie's distinctive ringtone. I almost didn't answer it, knowing that facing my sister right now would be like pouring salt in an open wound. But some masochistic part of me needed to hear what she had to say about stealing my wedding fund. "Rebecca," she squealed with her usual dramatic flair. "I have the most incredible news. Brad and I are coming over to show everyone my engagement ring. You simply have to see it." Within an hour, my parents' house was buzzing with family members who had been summoned to witness Stephanie's grand reveal. I arrived with Jonathan, my stomach churning with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity. We walked into the living room to find my 24-year-old sister holding court like a queen receiving her subjects, her left hand strategically positioned to catch every ray of light streaming through the windows. The engagement ring was absolutely massive, easily 3 carats of flawless diamonds set in platinum with smaller stones cascading down the band like a waterfall of light. It probably cost more than my entire wedding budget would have been, and Stephanie was making sure everyone in the room knew it. "Isn't it just magnificent?" she gushed, turning her hand this way and that to maximize the sparkle. "Brad said he wanted something that matched my personality, something unforgettable and spectacular." My mother was practically vibrating with excitement as she examined the ring through a jeweler's loupe that my father had mysteriously produced from somewhere. "This is a Tiffany setting," Patricia announced to the room with the authority of an expert, though I knew she'd never owned anything more expensive than her department store wedding set. "The center stone alone must be worth $50,000. I felt Jonathan's hand tighten around mine as Stephanie deliberately moved closer to where we were sitting. "Rebecca, darling, let me see your ring next to mine," she said with false sweetness, though her eyes held a predatory gleam that I recognized from our childhood. My engagement ring, which had seemed perfect and beautiful just yesterday, suddenly looked pathetic next to her massive diamond. The half-carat stone that Jonathan had saved for months to buy me now appeared like a grain of rice next to a golf ball. "Oh," Stephanie said with perfectly practiced surprise, as if she hadn't orchestrated this exact moment. "How quaint. There's something to be said for simplicity, isn't there? Some people prefer understated jewelry." The condescension in her voice was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I watched several family members shift uncomfortably as they witnessed her cruelty. Uncle David and Aunt Carol had arrived during this display, and they immediately gravitated towards Stephanie like moths to a flame. "Stephanie, dear, you look absolutely radiant," Aunt Carol gushed, barely glancing in my direction. "And this ring? My goodness, you've certainly landed yourself a prize catch." Uncle David nodded approvingly, already calculating the social benefits of having a Morrison family connection. "Where are you planning to have the wedding?" Aunt Carol asked breathlessly, as if she were asking about a royal coronation. Stephanie's smile grew even brighter as she launched into a detailed description that made my heart sink further with every word. "We're looking at the Grandview estate for the ceremony, with a reception at the country club. I'm thinking late spring, perhaps May, when all the flowers are in bloom. Brad's family has connections with the best photographers in the state, and I'm planning a destination bachelorette party in Napa Valley." Each detail she shared represented thousands of dollars, money that should have been mine. The Grandview estate alone cost $15,000 just for the venue rental. The country club reception would easily run $20,000 for the number of guests she was describing. As she continued painting this picture of extravagance, I did rough calculations in my head and realized she was planning to spend nearly double what my entire fund contained. "And the dress?" Stephanie continued, her voice rising with excitement. "I'm planning to visit several boutiques in the city. I want something truly spectacular, maybe a designer gown with hand beading and imported lace. After all, this might be the most important day of my entire life." The irony of her words wasn't lost on me. This was supposed to be the most important day of my life too, but apparently that consideration hadn't occurred to anyone in my family. Cousin Sarah, whom I'd always considered one of my closer family members, suddenly spoke up with enthusiasm that felt like a betrayal. "Stephanie, you absolutely must let me help with the planning. I have so many ideas for decorations and themes. This is going to be the wedding of the century." The eagerness in her voice made it clear that she had no intention of standing up for me or questioning where the money for this extravaganza was coming from. "Actually," Stephanie said with a sly smile, "I was hoping you'd agree to be my maid of honor, Sarah. I need someone reliable and creative to help me organize everything." I watched my cousin's face light up with excitement as she accepted the role that, in any normal family, might have been offered to the sister of the bride. The message was clear: I was not only being financially cut out of the family, but socially excluded as well. Jonathan had been sitting quietly through this entire display, but I could feel the tension building in him like pressure in a steam kettle. When Stephanie suggested taking engagement photos right there in the living room, positioning herself as the obvious star while relegating me to the background shadows, I felt him reach his breaking point. You know, Stephanie, he said with deceptive calm, it's interesting how quickly circumstances can change. Especially when they're built on foundations that aren't quite as solid as they appear. The subtle threat in his words made Stephanie pause in her posing, though she quickly recovered with a dismissive laugh. What do you mean by that, Jonathan? Everything about Brad and me is absolutely perfect. Jonathan smiled that same cold smile I'd seen the night before. I'm sure it appears that way from the outside. But appearances can be very deceiving, can't they? Before Stephanie could respond, my father interceded with forced joviality, clearly uncomfortable with the undercurrent of tension Jonathan was introducing. Now, let's keep this celebration positive. We're here to celebrate Stephanie's wonderful news. But I noticed that Richard avoided looking directly at Jonathan when he spoke, as if some instinct was warning him that there was more to my quiet fiancé than met the eye. As the afternoon wore on and more family members arrived to fawn over Stephanie and her ring, I felt myself becoming increasingly invisible. Every comment about how beautiful she looked, how lucky she was, how perfect everything was going to be, felt like another small death. These people had known me my entire life, had watched me work and sacrifice and dream about my own wedding day, and not one of them seemed to think there was anything wrong with what my parents had done. When we finally left that evening, I was emotionally drained and physically nauseated from the combination of stress and heartbreak. As Jonathan drove us home, he was unusually quiet, his jaw still clenched with barely contained anger. Jonathan, I said softly, what did you mean when you told Stephanie that circumstances could change quickly? He glanced at me with eyes that held a promise I didn't yet understand. Just that actions have consequences, Rebecca. And some consequences are bigger than others. I had no idea that within 48 hours, my family's perfect little world was about to come crashing down around them. 2 days after the ring incident, my mother called an emergency family meeting at their house, ostensibly to resolve the situation and restore family harmony. But as Jonathan and I arrived to find the living room packed with aunts, uncles, and cousins, it became clear that this was actually an intervention designed to pressure me into accepting my parents' decision and moving on without causing further drama. Uncle David had positioned himself as the family spokesman, his chest puffed with self-importance as he gestured for everyone to take their seats. Now, Rebecca, he began in the condescending tone he'd used on me since childhood, your parents have explained the situation, and I think we all agree that you're blowing this out of proportion. Family money should be used strategically for the benefit of everyone, and Stephanie's connection to the Morrison family is clearly the smartest investment we could make. The casual revelation that Uncle David had not only known about the theft for weeks but actually supported it felt like discovering another layer of betrayal I hadn't even known existed. You knew? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You knew they were stealing my wedding fund and you thought it was a good idea? David's expression remained unmoved by my obvious pain. I wouldn't call it stealing, dear. I'd call it reallocating family resources for maximum benefit. Your parents consulted me about the decision, and I completely supported their reasoning. Aunt Carol jumped in with her own brand of emotional manipulation, clasping her hands together dramatically as if she were about to deliver a prayer. Rebecca, sweetheart, your reaction to this is absolutely tearing our family apart. Is your wedding really more important than family unity? Stephanie's wedding is going to benefit all of us socially and financially. Surely you can see the wisdom in that. The suggestion that my pain and betrayal were somehow selfish made my hands shake with anger. Cousin Sarah, whom I'd trusted and confided in my entire life, delivered perhaps the most devastating blow of all. To be honest, Rebecca, I've been selected as Stephanie's maid of honor, and I really don't want your drama affecting what should be the most beautiful day of her life. Can't you just be happy for her and move on? The easy dismissal of my feelings from someone I'd considered a sister figure made me realize that my entire support system within the family was built on quicksand. As I sat there listening to these people who had claimed to love me systematically invalidate my feelings and justify my parents' betrayal, memories from childhood began flooding back with new clarity. I remembered how Stephanie got private piano lessons every week while I was expected to help with household chores to build character. I remembered family vacations where Stephanie's preferences for activities and restaurants always took precedence over mine. I remembered birthday parties where Stephanie somehow ended up being the center of attention even when it was supposed to be my day. But the most devastating memory that surfaced was about my college fund. My paternal grandparents, who had adored me, left money specifically for my education when they died during my junior year of high school. I'd been told that the money had been invested for my future and would be available when I graduated. But when college acceptance letters arrived, suddenly there wasn't enough money for the school I'd been accepted to, and I was encouraged to choose a less expensive state school and take out student loans for the difference. Now, sitting in this room full of family members who were defending my parents' latest theft, I realized that my college money had probably been reallocated to fund Stephanie's expensive private school education. The pattern of financial manipulation went back much further than I'd ever imagined, and I felt sick thinking about how many years I'd been lied to and cheated by people who claimed to love me. Jonathan had been sitting quietly through this family trial, but I could see him taking mental notes of every person who spoke against me. When Uncle David suggested that I should be grateful for the opportunity to attend Stephanie's beautiful wedding as a guest, Jonathan's control finally snapped. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "You're all defending the theft of money that Rebecca worked 10 years to save, and you think she should be grateful about it?" The room fell uncomfortably silent as Jonathan's words hung in the air. My father tried to regain control of the situation with bluster and intimidation. "Now see here, young man, you're talking about family matters that don't concern you. Rebecca will always be our daughter, and we know what's best for her." Jonathan's smile was absolutely chilling as he responded, "Actually, Richard, Rebecca's well-being concerns me more than anything else in this world. And what I'm seeing here is a family that has systematically abused and manipulated her for decades." Aunt Carol gasped dramatically at the word abuse, but Jonathan continued relentlessly. "Stealing someone's money is theft, regardless of whether you're related to them. Emotionally manipulating someone into accepting that theft is psychological abuse. And what I'm witnessing in this room is a coordinated effort to gaslight Rebecca into believing she's wrong for expecting basic respect and honesty from her family." The clinical precision with which Jonathan dissected their behavior made several family members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Uncle David tried to restore his authority by threatening Jonathan directly. "You have no idea who you're dealing with here, boy. This family has deep roots in this community, and we don't appreciate outsiders coming in and stirring up trouble." Jonathan's laugh was genuinely amused, which somehow made it even more intimidating. "Actually, David, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. And more importantly, I know who you're dealing with now." There was something in Jonathan's tone that made my father straighten up and really look at him for the first time. "What exactly does that mean?" Richard asked, and I heard the first note of uncertainty in his voice. Jonathan pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Michael?" "Yes, it's Jonathan. I need you to start that research we discussed. Full financial background check on the Harrison family, going back at least 10 years. I want to know about every questionable transaction, every suspicious transfer, every potential legal violation." The blood drained from my father's face as he realized that Jonathan wasn't just making empty threats. "Who are you calling?" Patricia asked nervously, her earlier confidence beginning to crack. Jonathan smiled as he ended the call. "That was my brother Michael. He's a partner at Brennan, Sterling, and Associates. You might have heard of them. They're one of the largest corporate law firms in the state. They specialize in financial fraud cases." The name of the law firm hit the room like a bomb. Even I knew that Brennan, Sterling, and Associates represented half the major corporations in our state and had a reputation for ruthless efficiency in legal matters. Uncle David's face had gone pale as he realized that the nobody he'd been threatening was connected to some of the most powerful lawyers in the region. "Now," Jonathan continued with deadly calm, "I'm going to give you all some free legal advice. What you've done to Rebecca constitutes multiple criminal violations including fraud, identity theft, and financial abuse. The money was stolen from accounts that included her social security number, which makes it a federal crime. But I'm a reasonable man, so I'm going to give you exactly 72 hours to return every penny you've stolen, plus a formal written apology to Rebecca, or my brother's firm is going to destroy every single one of you. The room erupted into nervous chatter as family members began to realize that their comfortable little conspiracy had serious legal implications. Stephanie, who had been noticeably quiet during this confrontation, finally spoke up with panic creeping into her voice. "You can't do this. You can't ruin my wedding over some stupid money dispute." Jonathan's gaze turned to her with the intensity of a laser beam. "Stephanie, your wedding was funded by stolen money. If you proceed with those plans, you become an accessory to fraud. I suggest you think very carefully about your next moves." As we left the house that night, the family was still arguing among themselves about damage control and legal exposure. I was stunned by the transformation I'd witnessed in my mild-mannered fiancé, who had just systematically dismantled my family's entire power structure in less than an hour. "Jonathan," I said as we got into his car, "I had no idea your family was so connected. You never mentioned that your brother was a partner at such a prestigious firm." He reached over and took my hand gently, the fierce protector melting back into the caring man I'd fallen in love with. "There are a lot of things about my family you don't know yet, Rebecca. But what you need to understand is that we protect the people we love, and we don't let anyone hurt them without consequences. Your family has been hurting you for years, and I'm not going to let it continue." As we drove home through the quiet streets, I began to realize that my life was about to change in ways I couldn't even imagine. The next morning brought a flurry of activity that showed me just how serious Jonathan had been about his 72-hour deadline. I woke up to find him already dressed and on the phone with someone, speaking in low, urgent tones about financial records and legal documentation. When he saw me stirring, he wrapped up the call quickly and came to sit on the edge of the bed with a gentle smile that somehow made his earlier intensity seem like a dream. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, kissing my forehead softly. "I hope you slept better than I did. We have a busy day ahead of us." I sat up, still trying to process the events of the previous evening. "Jonathan, what exactly is happening? Last night felt surreal, like you turned into a completely different person." His expression grew serious as he took my hands in his. "Rebecca, I need you to understand something about my family. We believe in taking care of our own, and we have the resources to do it effectively. Your family has been abusing you financially and emotionally for years, and I'm not going to stand by and watch it continue." Over breakfast, Jonathan began explaining the scope of the investigation his brother had already initiated. "Michael started running preliminary checks on your parents' finances last night. What we're looking for are patterns of questionable transfers, unauthorized use of your personal information, and any other family members who might have been victimized by similar schemes." The methodical approach he described made me realize that this wasn't an emotional reaction, it was a calculated campaign designed to expose years of financial manipulation. "But how can you do all this so quickly?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the speed at which events were unfolding. Jonathan's smile held secrets I was only beginning to glimpse. "My family owns more than just a law firm, Rebecca. We have connections throughout the business community, relationships with financial institutions, and resources that your parents can't even imagine. When we decide to investigate someone, we're very thorough." Around 10 o'clock, Jonathan's phone rang with an update from his brother. The conversation was brief but illuminating, and when Jonathan hung up, his expression was grim. "Michael found some interesting irregularities already. It appears your parents have been using your social security number to open accounts and transfer funds for at least 3 years. That's identity theft, which is a federal crime with serious prison time attached. The revelation that their theft went back years and involved using my identity made my stomach churn with a mixture of anger and nausea." "There's more," Jonathan continued, checking his notes from the call. "They also discovered that your father's employer has strict policies about employees involved in financial crimes. And your mother's medical practice could face licensing issues if she's convicted of fraud. The consequences for what they've done extend far beyond just returning your money. The systematic way he laid out the potential repercussions made me realize that my family had severely underestimated the man they were dealing with. By noon, Jonathan was coordinating with multiple people to apply pressure from different angles. His family's business connections included relationships with several major clients of my father's company, and word was already spreading through professional networks about the financial impropriety allegations. Your father's boss is going to start hearing concerns about employee conduct and potential legal liabilities by the end of the day, Jonathan explained with clinical detachment. Most companies prefer to distance themselves from employees who might expose them to legal risk. The scope of Jonathan's family's influence became clear when he mentioned that his parents belonged to the same country club where my parents desperately wanted to gain membership. My mother is having lunch with several ladies from the club today, and the conversation will naturally turn to recent developments in local families. By this evening, your parents' reputation in their social circle will be significantly damaged. The casual way he described destroying my parents' social standing made me realize that this was just the beginning of their consequences. When my phone rang around 2 o'clock with a call from my mother, her voice was shaky with panic. "Rebecca, dear, we need to talk. Some very disturbing rumors are circulating, and I think there may have been some misunderstanding about our family situation." The speed with which the pressure was affecting them surprised even me, though Jonathan just nodded with satisfaction when I told him about the call. "Tell her you'll consider meeting with them tomorrow, but only if they're prepared to discuss returning your money," Jonathan instructed. "And make sure she understands that every hour they delay makes their situation worse." When I relayed this message, my mother's response was telling. "Rebecca, you don't understand the position you're putting us in. Your father's job could be at risk, and people are asking questions we can't answer." The afternoon brought more updates from Jonathan's investigation network. His brother had discovered that my parents had also been moving money from other family accounts, including funds that were supposed to be held in trust for my younger cousin's education. "It appears your parents have been running a family Ponzi scheme for years," Jonathan explained with disgust. "They've been stealing from multiple relatives and using the money to fund their lifestyle and support Stephanie's expenses." By evening, the pressure campaign had expanded to include my mother's medical practice. Several patients had called asking questions about the doctor involved in the financial scandal, and her partners were demanding explanations about potential liability issues. "Medical licenses can be revoked for criminal convictions," Jonathan noted. "Professional boards take a very dim view of doctors who engage in fraud, even if it's not directly related to their practice." When my parents called that evening requesting an emergency meeting, Jonathan's response was characteristically direct: "You have 48 hours remaining. Every minute you delay returning Rebecca's money makes the legal consequences more severe. I suggest you use your time wisely." The controlled fury in his voice made it clear that he was far from finished applying pressure to my family. As we went to bed that night, I was still struggling to process the dramatic transformation in my previously quiet fiancé. "Jonathan," I said as we settled in for sleep, "I feel like I'm discovering a completely different side of you. Where did all this come from?" He pulled me close and kissed the top of my head gently. "It came from loving you, Rebecca. When someone hurts the person you love most in the world, you discover capabilities you didn't know you had. Your family crossed a line they should never have crossed, and now they're going to face the consequences." The certainty in his voice told me that my parents' ordeal was far from over, and I fell asleep wondering what the next 24 hours would bring. I woke up the second day to find Jonathan already on his third phone call of the morning, coordinating what he called Phase 2 of the pressure campaign. The methodical approach he was taking to dismantling my parents' life was both impressive and terrifying. Every aspect of their existence was being systematically targeted with precision that spoke to serious planning and unlimited resources. "Your father's boss wants to see him first thing this morning," Jonathan informed me over coffee, scrolling through messages on his phone. "Several major clients have expressed concerns about working with someone involved in financial impropriety. His company's legal department is reviewing his employment contract to determine their liability exposure. The speed with which professional consequences were materializing made me realize that Jonathan's family wielded influence I was only beginning to understand. Around 9 o'clock, Jonathan's phone rang with an update from his mother, who had apparently been busy spreading word throughout their social circle. The country club board met in emergency session this morning, he reported after ending the call. Your parents' membership application, which they submitted 6 months ago, has been permanently rejected. Several current members have also expressed concerns about socializing with people involved in family financial scandals. The destruction of my parents' social aspirations was swift and comprehensive. My mother called shortly after, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Rebecca, we need to resolve this situation immediately. Your father's been called into his boss's office, and I've had 3 patients cancel appointments because of ridiculous rumors about our family. This has gone too far. The desperation in her voice was almost satisfying after years of being dismissed and minimized by her. I'll speak with Jonathan, I replied coolly, but you need to understand that this ends when you return my money and apologize properly. Jonathan's investigation had uncovered even more disturbing information about my parents' financial manipulation. They've been systematically stealing from family members for over 5 years, he explained, showing me documents his brother had compiled. Your college fund was just the beginning. They took money from your cousin Sarah's inheritance, your uncle's retirement account that he asked them to manage, and even the funds from your grandmother's estate that were supposed to be distributed equally among grandchildren. The scope of their theft was staggering and explained how they'd been able to maintain their lifestyle while supporting Stephanie's expensive tastes. By noon, word had spread to Stephanie's fiancé's family, and the consequences there were immediate and devastating. Brad's mother called off their engagement lunch planned for this weekend, Jonathan reported with grim satisfaction. The Morrison family is very image-conscious, and they don't want to be associated with financial scandals. They're reconsidering whether Stephanie is an appropriate match for their son. The irony that my parents' favorite daughter was suffering consequences for their actions felt like cosmic justice. The pressure on my mother's medical practice intensified when the state medical board received an anonymous complaint about a doctor involved in financial crimes. Medical professionals are held to higher ethical standards, Jonathan explained. Even if the fraud isn't related to her practice, it reflects on her character and judgment. The board will conduct a formal investigation, and her partners are already discussing damage control strategies. The professional ramifications were mounting faster than my parents could manage. My father's employment situation deteriorated rapidly when his company's biggest client threatened to terminate their contract unless the employee situation was resolved immediately. Your father's boss has no choice but to put him on administrative leave pending the outcome of the legal investigation, Jonathan noted with clinical detachment. Most companies have zero tolerance for employees who expose them to legal liability or reputational damage. The loss of his income would make returning my stolen money even more critical for their survival. Stephanie called me that afternoon, her voice shrill with panic and accusation. Rebecca, you have to stop this insanity. Brad's family is asking questions I can't answer, and my wedding planning has come to a complete halt. How can you destroy my happiness over money? The entitlement in her voice made my anger flare white hot. Stephanie, you knew that money was stolen from me, and you didn't care. Now you're facing consequences for participating in fraud, and you want me to feel sorry for you? Her response revealed the depth of her selfishness. I deserve to be happy. I deserve to have a perfect wedding. You're just jealous because I found someone better than your nobody fiancé. The insult to Jonathan was the final straw. My nobody fiancé has more integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body, I shot back. And right now, he's demonstrating exactly why you should never underestimate people based on appearances. Jonathan's family connections extended into unexpected areas, including relationships with several wedding vendors in the city. Your sister's photographer just canceled her contract, he reported that evening. Apparently, there are concerns about payment reliability given the family's current financial scandal. The florist and caterer are also reconsidering their agreements. Watching Stephanie's perfect wedding crumble in real time was more satisfying than I'd expected. The social consequences were expanding beyond my immediate family as word spread through the community. Uncle David called that evening, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine concern. "Rebecca, this situation is affecting all of us now. My business partners are asking questions about my family connections, and several social obligations have been suddenly cancelled. You need to find a way to contain this before it destroys everyone." Jonathan's response to Uncle David's plea was uncompromising. "David, you had the opportunity to stand up for Rebecca when it mattered, and instead you chose to support the people who were stealing from her. The consequences you're facing now are the direct result of your own choices. If you want this to stop, convince your brother and sister-in-law to return Rebecca's money immediately." As we reviewed the day's developments that evening, I was amazed by the comprehensive nature of the pressure campaign Jonathan had orchestrated. Every aspect of my parents' life was under attack simultaneously: professional, social, financial, and legal. "How did you know how to do all this?" I asked him, still struggling to reconcile this strategic mastermind with the gentle man I'd fallen in love with. His answer revealed another layer of his background I hadn't known about. "My family has been involved in business and legal matters for generations, Rebecca. We've learned that when you need to apply pressure effectively, you have to understand how all the pieces of someone's life fit together. Your parents built their comfortable existence on a foundation of lies and theft. We're simply exposing that foundation to the light." The methodical destruction of my family's false prosperity was about to enter its final phase. By the morning of the third day, with only 24 hours remaining in Jonathan's ultimatum, my parents had moved into full desperation mode. The controlled pressure campaign had systematically dismantled every aspect of their comfortable life, and they were finally beginning to understand the true cost of their betrayal. What followed was a masterclass in manipulation tactics that revealed just how far they were willing to go to avoid accountability for their actions. The first call came at 6 a.m., with my mother sobbing hysterically into the phone about chest pains and a possible heart attack. "Rebecca, darling, the stress of this situation is literally killing me," she wailed dramatically. "I'm at the emergency room right now, and the doctors say my blood pressure is dangerously high. Is your wedding fund really worth your mother's life?" The manipulation was so transparent that I almost laughed, but Jonathan took the phone and handled the situation with characteristic directness. "Patricia," he said calmly, "if you're genuinely having medical issues, then you should focus on getting proper treatment instead of trying to guilt your daughter into accepting theft. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about returning Rebecca's money, we'll be available to discuss it." The medical emergency mysteriously resolved itself within an hour, when my mother realized that her dramatic performance wasn't going to work. Stephanie's meltdown was even more spectacular when Brad's family officially suggested postponing the wedding until the financial irregularities were resolved. She showed up at our apartment unannounced, her perfect makeup streaked with tears and her usually immaculate appearance disheveled from what appeared to be several sleepless nights. "Look what you've done to me," she shrieked, gesturing at her reflection in our hallway mirror. "I look like a disaster. Brad barely speaks to me anymore, and his mother treats me like I have some kind of contagious disease." The complete breakdown of her fairy tale life had stripped away all pretense of sisterly affection, revealing the bitter resentment that had always lurked beneath the surface. "I have worked my entire life to position myself for this marriage," she continued, her voice rising to a near scream. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to maintain the kind of perfection that someone like Brad expects? The workouts, the treatments, the careful social positioning? And you're destroying it all because you're jealous that I found someone who actually matters." Jonathan's response to her tantrum was devastating in its quiet precision. "Stephanie, you didn't work for this marriage. You built it on money stolen from your sister. The only reason you were able to maintain your perfect lifestyle was because your parents were systematically robbing Rebecca to fund your expenses. Now that the theft has been exposed, you're discovering that without stolen money, you can't maintain the facade that attracted Brad in the first place." The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow, and she collapsed into our hallway chair sobbing uncontrollably. You don't understand, she gasped between sobs. Without this wedding, without this marriage, I'm nothing. I don't have a career like Rebecca. I don't have any real skills. My entire identity is built around being the perfect wife for someone like Brad. The admission that her seemingly perfect life was built on stolen foundations was both satisfying and pathetic. My father's approach was more aggressive, showing up at my workplace during lunch hour in an attempt to pressure me publicly. Rebecca, this nonsense has gone far enough, he announced loudly enough for my coworkers to hear. You're destroying your entire family over money that frankly wasn't really yours to begin with. Your mother and I provided for you your whole life, and this is how you repay us? The public confrontation was designed to embarrass me into compliance, but it backfired spectacularly when my boss intervened. Mr. Harrison, my supervisor said coolly, I've heard about your family situation, and I have to say that I'm disgusted by your behavior. Rebecca is one of our most valued employees precisely because of her integrity and work ethic. The fact that you would steal from someone who has worked so hard to achieve her goals speaks very poorly of your character. The public humiliation of having my boss defend me against my own father was both gratifying and heartbreaking. Uncle David made one last desperate attempt to restore family unity by threatening to cut off all contact with me if I didn't come to my senses and forgive this minor misunderstanding. The threat might have carried weight years earlier, but now it seemed laughably insignificant compared to what I'd already lost. David, I told him calmly, you chose your side when you supported stealing from me. The consequences you're facing now are the direct result of your own choices. The most disturbing development was my parents' attempt to turn my elderly grandmother against me using carefully crafted lies about my mental instability and unreasonable demands. When Grandma Rose called me in tears, confused about why her family was falling apart, I realized that their manipulation knew no bounds. Grandma, I said gently, they stole $45,000 from me to pay for Stephanie's wedding, and when I asked them to return it, they claimed I was being selfish. That's all this is about. Her response was immediate and fierce, those idiots stole from you? Rebecca, honey, I've been watching your parents favor Stephanie for years, and it's been breaking my heart. If they think I'm going to support them stealing from my granddaughter, they're in for a rude awakening. The support from my grandmother, who had always been marginalized in family decisions, gave me strength I didn't know I needed. Jonathan spent most of the day coordinating final preparations for the legal consequences that would kick in if the deadline wasn't met. The fraud charges are ready to file, the civil lawsuit paperwork is complete, and we've documented every attempt at manipulation and intimidation your family has made over the past 72 hours, he reported that evening. At this point, they've made their situation significantly worse by trying to obstruct and manipulate instead of simply returning your money. As midnight approached, marking less than 12 hours until the deadline, my parents made one final desperate play by claiming they needed more time to liquidate assets to repay the money. Jonathan's response was swift and uncompromising, you had 10 months to plan this theft, and you've had 3 days to fix it. If you don't have a cashier's check for the full amount plus interest by noon tomorrow, every legal consequence we've discussed will be implemented immediately. That night, as we prepared for what would likely be the final confrontation with my family, Jonathan held me close and reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten during this nightmare week. Rebecca, no matter what happens tomorrow, you need to remember that you deserve so much better than the way they've treated you. You deserve a family that celebrates your achievements, supports your dreams, and would never steal from you. If they can't be that family, then we'll build a better one together. His words gave me the strength to face whatever consequences my parents' choices had created, knowing that I was finally free from the manipulation and abuse that had defined my relationship with my family for decades. The final day of Jonathan's ultimatum dawned with an eerie calm that felt like the stillness before a devastating storm. I woke to find Jonathan already dressed and reviewing legal documents with the methodical precision of a general preparing for battle. Today ends this, one way or another, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Your parents have had every opportunity to do the right thing, and they've chosen manipulation and delay instead. Now they're going to discover that some consequences can't be avoided or negotiated away. By 8 o'clock that morning, we'd received no communication from my parents despite the rapidly approaching noon deadline. Jonathan's phone buzzed with updates from his brother's law firm, confirming that all legal paperwork was finalized and ready for immediate filing. The fraud charges are prepared, the civil lawsuit is complete, and we have documented evidence of witness intimidation and obstruction, he reported with clinical detachment. At this point, your parents have created a legal nightmare that will take them years to resolve, even if they eventually comply. The first sign that my parents were finally beginning to grasp the severity of their situation came when my father's company officially terminated his employment at 9:30 a.m. The decision was swift and decisive. The company couldn't risk the reputational damage and legal liability of retaining an employee involved in federal fraud charges. Your father's 20-year career just ended because he chose to steal from his daughter rather than admit he couldn't afford his lifestyle, Jonathan observed with cold satisfaction. My mother's medical practice imploded even more dramatically when 3 of her 4 partners voted to remove her from the practice pending the resolution of criminal charges. The medical board had expedited their investigation after receiving multiple complaints about her involvement in financial crimes, and her professional reputation was in ruins. Medical licenses can be suspended or revoked for criminal convictions, Jonathan explained. Even if she avoids prison time, her career is essentially over. At 10 o'clock, with 2 hours remaining until the deadline, my parents made one final desperate attempt to negotiate. They called Jonathan directly, bypassing me entirely in a last-ditch effort to appeal to what they mistakenly believed was his reasonable nature. I listened on speakerphone as my father tried to bargain. Jonathan, son, surely we can work something out here. We're family, after all. Maybe we could set up a payment plan, return the money over time with interest. This nuclear option you're threatening will destroy everyone. Jonathan's response was devastating in its simplicity. Richard, you had 72 hours to return money you stole from Rebecca. Instead of compliance, you chose manipulation, intimidation, and delay. You've had multiple opportunities to resolve this honorably, and you've rejected every single one. The time for negotiation ended at midnight last night. You now have exactly 2 hours to deliver a certified check for $45,312, plus $3,000 in interest for the inconvenience you've caused Rebecca. After that, every legal remedy available will be implemented immediately. The desperation in my parents' voices became palpable as they realized their tactics had failed completely. You don't understand the position you're putting us in, my mother pleaded through tears that sounded genuine for the first time in years. We don't have that kind of liquid cash available immediately. Stephanie's wedding deposits are non-refundable, and we've already committed to expenses we can't recover. Jonathan's laugh was genuinely amused, which somehow made it more terrifying than anger would have been. Patricia, he said with mock sympathy, you're explaining exactly why stealing money is illegal. You took Rebecca's savings to fund expenses you couldn't afford, and now you're discovering that theft has consequences. The fact that you spent stolen money on non-refundable deposits doesn't create an obligation for Rebecca to accept your theft. It creates a legal obligation for you to find another way to repay what you stole. 11 o'clock came and went with no sign of compliance from my parents. Stephanie called in hysterics, reporting that her wedding venue had officially canceled their contract after learning about the payment method irregularities. The Morrison family had withdrawn completely from wedding planning and was reassessing the viability of the engagement according to Brad's mother. My entire life is falling apart because of your selfishness. Stephanie screamed into the phone, her perfect facade completely shattered by the consequences of her participation in fraud. At 11:45, 15 minutes before the deadline, my parents arrived at Jonathan's family law firm with a certified check and what appeared to be a hastily written apology letter. But Jonathan's brother Michael reviewed the documentation and immediately identified multiple problems with their last-minute compliance attempt. The check amount is short by almost $1,000, he reported over the phone. And the apology letter blames Rebecca for overreacting to what they call a family financial misunderstanding. This isn't good faith compliance, it's another manipulation attempt. When Jonathan relayed these deficiencies to my parents, my father's response revealed how little he understood about the gravity of his situation. "We're giving her most of the money back, and we apologized. What more does she want?" The casual dismissal of their theft as a minor family dispute and their expectation that partial compliance should be sufficient demonstrated that they still didn't grasp the seriousness of their crimes. "Richard," Jonathan said with the patience of someone explaining basic concepts to a child, "theft is not a family financial misunderstanding. Fraud is not an overreaction. You have exactly 13 minutes to deliver full compliance, or every legal consequence we've discussed will be implemented immediately. There will be no partial credit for incomplete compliance." The finality in his voice made it clear that the time for mercy had long since passed. At precisely noon, with my parents still scrambling to arrange additional funds, Jonathan's brother filed criminal fraud charges with the district attorney's office and initiated the civil lawsuit in state court. The legal machinery that had been carefully prepared over 3 days sprang into action with devastating efficiency. Bank accounts were frozen, property liens were filed, and official legal notices were served before my parents fully understood what was happening. The media attention began almost immediately when local news outlets picked up the story of prominent community members arrested on fraud charges. "Local businessman and physician arrested for financial crimes against family member," read the headline that appeared online within hours of the charges being filed. The public humiliation that my parents had spent their lives avoiding had become unavoidable. As we watched the consequences unfold throughout the afternoon, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice was finally being served, but the complete destruction of my family relationships was painful even when it was necessary. Jonathan seemed to understand my conflicted emotions and held me close as we watched my parents' carefully constructed life crumble under the weight of their own choices. "They chose this outcome every step of the way," he reminded me gently. "You offered them multiple opportunities to resolve this honorably, and they chose manipulation and delay instead. What's happening now isn't your fault, it's the inevitable consequence of years of lies and theft finally being exposed to the light." The 72-hour deadline had passed, and there was no going back for any of us. In the weeks following the legal filing, the full scope of my parents' financial manipulation was revealed through court-ordered discovery and forensic accounting. What Jonathan's investigation team uncovered was far more extensive and disturbing than even I had imagined. The systematic theft and emotional abuse had been going on for over a decade, affecting not just me but multiple family members who had trusted my parents with their financial affairs. The forensic accountants working for Jonathan's brother discovered that my college fund theft was just the tip of the iceberg. My parents had systematically stolen from Uncle David's retirement account that he'd asked them to manage while he was overseas, cousin Sarah's inheritance from her maternal grandparents, and even funds from my paternal grandmother's estate that were supposed to be distributed equally among all grandchildren. The total amount of money they had stolen from family members exceeded $200,000 over 8 years. Dr. Elizabeth Martinez, the psychologist Jonathan arranged for me to see, helped me understand that what I'd experienced wasn't just financial theft but a comprehensive pattern of emotional and psychological abuse designed to maintain control and justify favoritism. "Your parents used systematic devaluation, gaslighting, and financial manipulation to keep you dependent and compliant," she explained during one of our sessions. The wedding fund theft was simply the most recent and obvious example of a pattern that's been going on your entire life. The psychological evaluation revealed that I'd been suffering from what Dr. Martinez termed complex family trauma that had systematically undermined my self-worth and ability to recognize abuse. "You were trained from childhood to accept being treated as less valuable than your sister," she said gently. "The family dynamics you described represent textbook emotional abuse, with your parents using financial control and favoritism to maintain power over both daughters in different ways." Understanding the psychology behind my family's behavior was both liberating and heartbreaking. I began to see how every family interaction I'd interpreted as normal childhood rivalry had actually been calculated manipulation designed to keep me in a subordinate role. Stephanie hadn't just been the favorite. She'd been weaponized against me as part of a control system that kept both of us trapped in unhealthy patterns. The legal proceedings advanced quickly once the evidence was compiled. My parents' attempt to claim the money transfers were gifts fell apart when investigators discovered they'd forged my signature on several documents and used my social security number without permission. The identity theft charges alone carried potential prison sentences of up to 10 years each, and the fraud charges added additional decades of possible incarceration. Stephanie's world collapsed completely when Brad Morrison officially ended their engagement after learning the full extent of her family's financial crimes. The Morrison family's statement was brief and brutal: "We cannot associate our family name with individuals involved in systematic fraud and theft. The engagement is terminated permanently." The public humiliation of being dumped by the town's most eligible bachelor sent Stephanie into a breakdown that required psychiatric intervention. The community response was swift and decisive. My parents found themselves completely isolated socially, with former friends and colleagues refusing to associate with convicted fraudsters. The country club they desperately wanted to join issued a statement barring them from ever applying for membership, and several charitable organizations they'd supported publicly distanced themselves from any connection to the Harrison name. Uncle David, who had initially supported my parents' theft, became one of the first family members to reach out with an apology once the full scope of their crimes became clear. "Rebecca, I owe you a profound apology," he said during an emotional phone call. "I was so focused on the social benefits of Stephanie's marriage that I didn't stop to consider the moral implications of how it was being funded. What your parents did to you was theft, plain and simple, and I was wrong to support it." Cousin Sarah's apology was even more significant because she revealed additional information about my parents' manipulation tactics. "They've been systematically poisoning family relationships for years," she admitted during a tearful conversation. "They would tell different family members different versions of events to maintain control and prevent us from comparing notes. I'm realizing now that half of what I believed about family dynamics was based on lies they told me." The financial recovery process was more successful than anyone had expected. In addition to recovering my original wedding fund, the court ordered my parents to pay damages for emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive awards that nearly tripled my settlement. The money they'd stolen from other family members was also recovered, with the court ordering the liquidation of assets including their house and vehicles to satisfy the judgments. Jonathan's family formally welcomed me with a celebration that showed me what healthy family dynamics actually looked like. His parents, Margaret and Robert, treated me with warmth and respect that felt foreign after years of being dismissed and marginalized. "Rebecca," his mother said during the family dinner where they officially announced their support for our relationship, "we're honored to have you joining our family. Anyone who could work as hard as you did to save for your dreams and still maintain your integrity through what you've endured is exactly the kind of person we want as a daughter." The wedding planning process with Jonathan's family support was a revelation in itself. Instead of having every decision questioned and every expense scrutinized, I found myself surrounded by people who genuinely wanted to help create a beautiful celebration of our love. Jonathan's parents insisted on contributing significantly to the wedding budget, not as a replacement for what was stolen but as a genuine gift to welcome me into their family. My professional life flourished once I was free from the constant stress and manipulation of my family's situation. The integrity and work ethic that had been dismissed by my parents were recognized and rewarded by my employer, who promoted me to a management position with a substantial salary increase. "Rebecca," my boss explained during the promotion meeting, "your handling of your family crisis showed us the kind of character we want in leadership positions. You maintained your professionalism and integrity even under extraordinary personal pressure." The healing process was gradual but transformative. Dr. Martinez helped me develop healthy boundaries and recognize my own worth independent of my family's validation. "You spent years believing that your value was determined by how well you served your family's needs," she explained. "Learning to value yourself based on your own achievements and character is going to take time, but you're already showing tremendous progress." As the legal proceedings moved toward final resolution, I found myself feeling more at peace than I had in years. The constant anxiety of trying to please people who would never be satisfied was replaced by the security of knowing I was valued and protected by people who genuinely cared about my well-being. Jonathan's unwavering support throughout the process had shown me what real love looked like, and I was finally beginning to understand that I deserved to be treated with respect and kindness. The transformation from victim to empowered woman wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my growth and future happiness. I was learning to trust my own judgment, set appropriate boundaries, and recognize healthy relationships. The girl who had accepted being treated as second best was evolving into a woman who knew her worth and refused to accept anything less than genuine love and respect. 6 months after Jonathan's 72-hour ultimatum changed my life forever, I stood in the bridal suite at Grandview Estate, the same venue my parents had promised to Stephanie, preparing for my own wedding day. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was getting married in the exact location that had been funded with my stolen money, but now it was being paid for by people who genuinely loved and supported me. Jonathan's family had insisted on creating the wedding of my dreams, not as charity but as a celebration of welcoming me into a family that valued integrity over appearances. The guest list told the story of my transformation perfectly. Instead of family members who had spent years dismissing and manipulating me, I was surrounded by Jonathan's relatives who had embraced me wholeheartedly, colleagues who respected my work ethic and character, and new friends I'd made once I was free from the constant stress of family drama. My grandmother Rose sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched me finally get the celebration I deserved. Dr. Martinez had prepared me for the complex emotions I might feel on my wedding day, knowing that the absence of my parents and sister would create both sadness and relief. Grief for the family you deserve to have is natural and healthy, she'd explained. But celebrating the family you've chosen and the life you're building is equally important. The wedding felt like a symbolic rebirth, marking not just my marriage to Jonathan but my emergence from decades of psychological manipulation. The legal resolution had been swift and comprehensive. My parents pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and identity theft, receiving prison sentences of 3 years each along with massive financial penalties. Stephanie, who had been charged as an accessory after knowingly participating in spending stolen money, received 2 years of probation and community service. The public nature of their convictions ensured that their reputations in the community were permanently destroyed. The financial recovery exceeded my wildest expectations. In addition to my original wedding fund, the court awarded damages for emotional distress, punitive compensation for years of psychological abuse, and full recovery of legal fees. The total settlement approached $150,000, providing security I'd never imagined possible. More importantly, other family members who had been victimized by my parents' schemes also recovered their stolen money through the court proceedings. Jonathan's brother Michael had become not just my attorney but a genuine friend and ally throughout the legal process. "Rebecca," he told me during our final meeting, "your case has become a model for how financial abuse within families should be prosecuted. The precedent we've set will help other victims who might have believed they had no recourse against family members who stole from them." Knowing that my courage in fighting back might help other people escape similar abuse gave meaning to the painful process I'd endured. The professional recognition I received for my integrity during the crisis opened doors I'd never expected. 3 different companies had approached me with job offers that represented significant career advancement, and my current employer had fast-tracked my promotion timeline in recognition of the leadership qualities I'd demonstrated. "Your ability to maintain your professionalism and ethical standards under extreme personal pressure shows us the kind of character we want in senior management," my boss explained during my latest performance review. Stephanie's attempted reconciliation came through a letter delivered by her court-appointed therapist, part of her mandated psychological counseling. The letter acknowledged some responsibility for participating in the theft but was filled with justifications and self-pity that showed she still didn't truly understand the impact of her actions. "I'm sorry you were hurt by the family financial situation," she'd written, "but I hope you can forgive me and help me rebuild my life now that Brad has left me." The conditional apology and immediate request for help demonstrated that her fundamental character hadn't changed. My decision not to respond to Stephanie's letter was supported by Dr. Martinez, who explained that forgiveness doesn't require maintaining relationships with people who continue to be harmful. You can release your anger and resentment for your own healing without opening yourself up to further manipulation, she advised. Forgiveness is about freeing yourself from the burden of anger, not about giving abusive people access to hurt you again. The wedding ceremony itself was everything I'd dreamed it would be and more. Jonathan's vows brought tears to everyone's eyes as he promised to protect, cherish, and support me through whatever challenges life might bring. "Rebecca," he said, his voice strong with emotion, "you've shown me what true courage looks like by standing up for yourself when everyone you should have been able to trust betrayed you. I promise to spend every day of our marriage proving that you deserve to be loved unconditionally, supported completely, and celebrated for the amazing woman you are." My own vows reflected the growth and healing I'd experienced over the past months. "Jonathan, you taught me that I deserve to be valued and protected, not used and manipulated. You showed me what real love looks like by standing up for me when I was too hurt and confused to stand up for myself. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine partnership." The contrast between the healthy relationship I was entering and the toxic family dynamics I was leaving behind couldn't have been clearer. Jonathan's grandmother, a 92-year-old woman with steel in her spine and warmth in her heart, pulled me aside during the reception with words that touched my soul. "My dear girl," she said with fierce conviction, "you're exactly what this family has been waiting for. Someone with backbone and character who knows the value of hard work and integrity. That boy of mine chose well, and we're all better for having you." The acceptance from his extended family felt like coming home after years of being a stranger in my own house. The honeymoon was spent in Ireland, a trip that represented not just a celebration of our marriage but a symbolic journey toward the new life we were building together. Standing on the cliffs of Moher with Jonathan beside me, looking out over the endless ocean, I felt a peace and contentment I'd never experienced before. The constant anxiety and self-doubt that had plagued me for years was gone, replaced by confidence in my worth and security in my future. Returning from our honeymoon to the beautiful home Jonathan and I had purchased together, I reflected on the incredible transformation my life had undergone in less than a year. The scared, manipulated woman who had accepted being treated as second best was gone, replaced by someone who knew her value and refused to accept anything less than genuine love and respect. The stolen wedding fund had been returned with interest, but more importantly, I'd gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I deserved to be treated with dignity and kindness. Dr. Martinez had prepared me for the ongoing process of healing from complex family trauma, explaining that recovery isn't linear and that I might still struggle with self-doubt and boundary setting. "But you've already proven to yourself that you have the strength to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult," she reminded me. "Trust that strength, and remember that you have people in your life now who will support you unconditionally." The final legal paperwork arrived on our 6-month wedding anniversary, officially closing the criminal cases against my parents and confirming the completion of all financial restitution. Reading the document that formally ended their ability to manipulate and steal from family members felt like closing a chapter on the most painful period of my life and opening a new one filled with possibility and hope. As I sit here today, sharing this story with all of you, I want every person watching to understand something crucial. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, especially by the people who claim to love you. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and systematic favoritism within families are not normal or acceptable, regardless of how common they might seem. If someone you trust steals from you, lies to you, or consistently treats you as less valuable than others, those actions reveal their character, not your worth. The courage to stand up for yourself might seem impossible when you're trapped in abusive family dynamics, but I'm living proof that it's not only possible but necessary for your own well-being and future happiness. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to walk away from people who refuse to treat you with basic human dignity, even when those people are family members. I want to hear from all of you in the comments below. Have you ever experienced financial abuse or emotional manipulation from family members? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Your stories matter, and sharing them might help someone else who's struggling with similar situations. Please hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our content about overcoming family trauma and building healthy relationships. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people in their lives. Sometimes the most important message someone can receive is that their feelings are valid, their experiences matter, and they have the right to expect respect and honesty from everyone, including family members. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey from victim to survivor to someone who's learned to thrive despite the worst that family betrayal can offer. Remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you choose to treat yourself and what standards you set for the people you allow in your life. You are valuable, you are worthy of love and respect, and you have the strength to create the life you deserve, even if it means leaving toxic people behind. Until next time, remember that sometimes the family you choose is far more valuable than the family you're born into, and that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video.